Hello everybody, this is Mr. Rader. This video is for students in economics working on the Unit 2 case study for business, ethics, and government regulation. And in this short video, we'll take a look at the case study itself as part of the introduction/model part of the lesson. And we'll also examine a cartoon that speaks to this issue related to government regulation, price gouging, and the pharmaceutical industry. It builds on what you learned about in day 8. So for the cartoon, you will examine this cartoon here where we have two individuals in a pharmacy, and the pharmacist is saying, quote, your money or your life. And two questions to respond to. How might the cartoon connect to what you've learned in day 8? And how might this be described as an economics problem considering supply, demand, and scarcity? So in the other part of the introduction to model, we'll take a look at the scenario and the dilemma for this situation. We'll consider economics concepts that are important to the case study. We'll think about how the dilemma is an economics problem as it's interrelated with public policy. And also it's important to think about what you would assume, what you think should happen in this dilemma based on the situation at hand. Taking on the case study itself, it did provide several notations. So if at any point you want to pause the video and read through some of the notations, they are really there to support you in your understanding of the case study. So in this scenario, we have a US multinational pharmaceutical company named Caduceus Corporation. And what we can see is that they created a drug that effectively treats several kinds of cancer, significantly lowering risk of death without the toxic side effects of existing cancer treatments. So it's something that people would certainly want to have access to, and it would be a treatment that would be in high demand. So the drug was developed using technologies and methods discovered by US government-funded research. So I noted if the government subsidized the research, should they be able to regulate its price? Is that an ethical decision or is it not an ethical decision? We can see in the scenario that the price is so high that it's inaccessible to 98% of cancer patients. So this is a real problem in terms of access to the resource that individuals would need. It's the key problem here. The company is claiming that they cannot afford to lower the price as it costs them billions of dollars to bring the drug to market. So in the dilemma, what we want to consider is essentially taking on the role of a US senator and debating whether or not to pass legislation as public policy to set a price ceiling or another kind of intervention on this new drug so that more people can gain access to this information. Right, so these are the things that we really want to consider, especially as it relates to the research and development costs for this particular pharmaceutical. When we go through this, it is important to consider the opportunity cost of a treatment, that option that's cheaper but half as effective for the patient. So that's something that you'll want to think about as you negotiate with your classmates in the philosophical chairs discussion, which you'll do on day 10 or the second part of this case study, to really figure out what it is you want to do. In terms of doing this, you'll read through some of the articles in the Annotated Bibliography as part of the independent portion of the lesson, and that'll help you to think about whether or not the government ought to actually regulate these prices for this cancer treatment drug. So the first question we need to think about is it ethical for pharmaceutical companies to charge high prices for life-saving drugs? And I just recommend go back to day 8, take a look at what you wrote down when you read the article on Humira, and look at that opening quote, really thinking about what ethics really illustrate, what they signify, and that'll help you kind of make your decision here. The second question, does the government have the right to regulate pharmaceutical drug prices? So that's another question, thinking about the powers that governments have. And then thinking about if it's equitable that the US government regulates the prices of drugs for veterans as one demographic, as one subgroup of the American population and senior citizens, but not the public at large. So again, in this case, we're looking at equity in terms of an issue related to access. Who is actually getting access to these scarce resources? So that's really what the economics problem is how do we allocate resources fairly and equitably in a way that is going to provide support for people who are suffering from various cancers. In terms of the anti-bibliography itself, it may help to make some notes to yourselves as to whether or not a particular source is either for additional government regulation or if it's against additional government regulation. So, for example, if we're asking on how the government should intervene, and one thing, if they should regulate the drug prices, the highlighted, just for example, the one in blue shows us that this is, the government shouldn't really be involved with this. Some of the articles speak to other issues. So again, read the abstracts for each of these links, and then you'll want to find a couple that speak to you and really the positions that you want to take on the issue. So for example, the second article looks at possible solutions without actually taking a stance. By contrast, this article is a very, very pro-intervention stance. And then again, there's the second page of resources in the annotated bibliography. Again, speaks to the various things to kind of keep in mind. And really, that'll help you to really think about to what extent the government should actually be getting involved to regulate these particular prices, especially given the fact that they subsidize the research and development for this pharmaceutical. All right, so I'll end the clip momentarily. Just want to give you directions in case you are working on this assignment independently or remotely. If you have classmates who are you in a group with, it may make sense to divide up the text in the annotated bibliography so each of you reads one or two. This way you have additional notes, and then you can hopefully crowdsource your notes by creating one Google Doc, share it with everybody so everybody could add their notes into that Google Doc so that when you come to class for day 10 and you do the philosophical chair's statement, you'll really be able to contribute something meaningful to the conversation. All right, so we'll continue in our next video looking at the philosophical chair's protocol. Have a great day, everybody.